It is time for the Deep South's oldest rivalry, the preview show of Auburn and Georgia. And unfortunately, if you are an Auburn fan, this game has been dominated by Georgia since 2017. The Bulldogs are on an 8-game win streak as the last win for Auburn came at home back in 2017. And if you guys will remember, that was the same year that they faced off against one another a couple of weeks later in the SEC championship game, and Georgia started that win streak then. We will be joined by Kyle Rush on the other side of this open to talk about this game from the from the Auburn perspective, and then later on we will be talking about this game from Georgia, as this is the Deep South's oldest rivalry preview show right here on the Stingray Show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
And with that, I want to say War Eagle. Well, Auburn's not really warring too well right now, as Auburn is looking, if they do not win Saturday, to start the season 0-3 in conference play in a year that was supposed to be the make it or break it year for Coach Hugh Freeze down at Auburn. Welcome inside the Stingray Show, and as we wait on Kyle Rush to join us, I want to discuss and talk with you about Alabama Crimson Tide history on October the 10th, which is today, and historically, the Crimson Tide have played 6 games on October the 10th and have an undefeated record of 5-0 and 1 tie on this date. Now, most recently, back in 2020, on October the 10th, Alabama had a historic offensive shootout in Oxford, Mississippi, in which they won 63-48. Running back Najee Harris had a career best day, rushing for 206 yards and tying an Alabama record with 5 rushing touchdowns on that evening, and quarterback Mac Jones threw for 417 yards and 2 touchdowns, completing 28 of 32 passes. So on this day in 2020, the COVID year, Alabama 63, Ole Miss 48. When we go back to 2009, Alabama beat Ole Miss in a defensive dominating game, 22-3 over the Ole Miss Rebels, forcing 4 interceptions. Running back Mark Ingram ran for 172 yards and scored the game's only touchdown, and kicker Lee Tiffin hit 5 field goals to secure the win for Alabama in 2009 against Ole Miss. When we go back to 1992, Alabama won 37-0 over Tulane on the road in New Orleans. And finally, Alabama back in 1936 had a home game at Bryant-Denny Stadium against Mississippi State, in which they won 7-0, and Joe Kilgo, who faked a punt and ran 83 yards to score the only touchdown, and Kilgo also kicked the extra point. And the one lone tie for Alabama was against Southern Miss in Birmingham back on this day in 1981. Southern Miss 13 and Alabama 13. So Alabama has had a really good run on football games on October the 10th. Now, let's welcome in and talk about the other team in the state of Alabama that is in the SEC, and things are not going well down on the plains for Auburn and Hugh Freeze, as this is year number 3 for Hugh Freeze down there, and everybody thought that this was going to be the make it or break it year for Hugh, and unfortunately, it has gone sideways as they started off 0-2 in conference. Kyle, how are things with you in Auburn, Alabama? And we've talked about with you before, this was the make it or break it year for Hugh Freeze in Auburn, and unfortunately, so far, it is going sideways. What is going wrong with
Yeah.
Auburn and Hugh Freeze on the plains?
Well, the weather here is beautiful, so hopefully, maybe we can get a beautiful offensive game plan on Saturday. Look, I could point to probably a number of different reasons, and most of them are all on offense. But I feel like it's really two main things. Number one, they've just unfortunately missed on some quarterback evaluations. I think that Peyton Thorne was he was a good quarterback, but there were some weaknesses as far as how it fit with what Hugh wanted to do. And then I think you're seeing a lot of the same things with Jackson Arnold. So that's a tough question you have to ask. Do we have a development problem or do we have an evaluation problem? Honestly, it could be a little bit of both, but really you struggled at the quarterback position, and you've seen across the country some of the best teams in the country right now are just having phenomenal quarterback play. So that's number one. And then number two is I really think Hugh gave up on having someone else run the offense too quickly. And I will admit that I championed that move. I championed the move for Hugh to call the plays because, as he said multiple times over the last 3 years, that he's had success everywhere he's been, and he's had a little bit of an edge at times as well as just, hey, I get in the flow of the game, and I'm just one of the best play callers in the country. And I don't think up until just recently many people would argue with that. But what I think is happening, and you've seen coaches like Kenny Dillingham and Eli Drinkwitz both come to the realization that with the job the way it is today, as big as it is, heck, these staffs are like upwards of like hundreds of people now. Like you manage a multi-million, tens of millions of dollar organization, and you're responsible for all of it. And then combining that with coming up with a game plan and then executing it on the field, I think it's just too much. And Kenny Dillingham and Eli Drinkwitz both recently have given up play calling. And I think Kenny was like, look, here's the deal. I couldn't be in all of the meetings. I couldn't be a part of crafting the game plan. So while the plays I'm calling on Saturday might make sense, the problem is I'm not the one that put it together. So I walk out there Saturday and they hand me a play sheet, and then I'm calling a game plan that someone else thought up in their mind. So I think maybe that's a little bit what's going on, and there's just a disconnect between the game plan and then what Hugh wants to do, and it just becomes a mess. And I'll say this too. I think he's got a lot of I'm going to say quotas going on in his head. He's thinking of play calling and roster management. I think at the same time, I got to have X amount of touches for this person. I got to have X amount of targets for this person to keep everybody happy. And I just don't think that is a recipe for success. And that's why it looks like a complete mess on offense. And then you look at the other side of the ball and they rotate and play a ton of guys, but the product looks the same no matter who's in the game. So I could probably give you a list of 5 or 10 things that are going wrong, but basically it all points back to Hugh and organization and game planning. And I think he would tell you himself he's fallen short there right now, and they got to get something fixed, and they got to get something fixed quickly if they're going to mend some of these fences.
Let's start with the offensive line because Auburn has given up 17 sacks in the last 2 games against Oklahoma and on the road against Texas A&M, and that was before this bye week. Talk about the offensive line and the struggles there, please.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, the other 3 games when you've been at home, you had very few procedural penalties at Baylor. because it's just not that loud of an environment. And then you come home and you have almost no procedural penalties. And then you go on the road and it's like you can't even figure out the snap count.
Right.
So I don't think I think a lot of the issues you saw as far as protection goes are not being able to adjust to crowd noise, not being able, maybe should have gone to a silent count versus the clap cadence that everybody seems to do now. Regardless, there's definitely been a communication breakdown there on the offensive line, which I think makes everybody play a little bit slower. And I think you could probably chalk a lot of it up to that. And then you can also chalk a lot of it up to, my God, man, you're in 3rd and 8 and longer in every single drive. Like that's not a recipe for success for any offensive line, much less Auburn's. I think there was a point in time where in either the Oklahoma game or the Texas A&M game where Auburn had 5 or 6, not possessions, but it's, I guess, set of downs, 5 or 6 set of downs in a row where your second down was 2nd and 10 or longer. It's just, you can't, and you can't have success there with that type of, with those type of situations. Like, why not? Hey, let's, instead of trying to dial up the play and play sort of panicky, have a little bit of patience. And hey, 2nd and 7's not bad. 2nd and 6 isn't bad. Let's try to get to 3rd and 5, man. 3rd and 5 or less. And then maybe your playbook opens up a little bit more and you're not putting so much pressure on your offensive line to produce. I think there's talent there. I think they're talented on the offensive line. I think they got some athletic ability. I think they're just being put in impossible situations. And I don't think, I think it all stems from just the complete disorganization of what's going on the offensive side.
Kyle, it was announced, I believe it was Tuesday, that Auburn gave up a home game next year to move it to Atlanta. What is the latest that you can tell us about that, please?
So obviously it came out at a weird time, but I talked to a lot of people and they're like, well, when should we have let that out? Like, what if Auburn loses the next 3? Then you let it out and you're 3 and 6 or whatever it would be. There was no way that this wasn't going to have some backlash, especially from fans and then maybe local folks, local business owners. It's a tough blow there. And I can totally understand all of the concerns and the disappointment 100%. Okay. Now, the problem is I think we still want college football to be the college football from 1995 and 1985 and heck, even 2005. We still want college football to be that. And it's just not. It's just not. It's not that anymore. There is a new sheriff in town, and it is talent acquisition and money. And I don't think people really understand how hard it is to get this is, by the way, this is something that I learned, that the $5 million number that's being talked about, that's minimum. There's upwards of like $10 to $12 million that could be earned depending on, I'm assuming, what level of athletes you have and their social media following and what kind of posts they can do to pump up the game, what kind of reach that they could get. Like I'm assuming there's a lot of those factors in play, but I don't think people understand how hard it is to just have, let's just go with $5 million. $5 million that's 100% approved, 100% ready to go, and 100% does not count against your rev share number. Like, that's hard. That takes a ton of small deals typically to add up to get to the 5 million. You get it, boom, in one fell swoop. Auburn's not going to be the only one to do this. Like, there's going to be a lot of teams down the road that I think are going to see this, because this is supposed to be one of the first of their kind, and sort of emulate it. So I see both sides of the argument. I see the local aspect. This is not going to replace it all. It may replace a lot of it, but Auburn Athletics partnered with Peachtree Entertainment, and they're bringing in a concert series. They're going to try to sell out Jordan Hare Stadium a couple of times and Neville Arena. you got 6 different concert dates lined up for next year that hopefully can help. Probably not replace it all, but replace a lot of maybe some lost income there. So it's a tough conversation, but you got to look at it through the lens of what college football is today, and not what you wish it was back in like 1995.
Now, getting back to the game on Saturday,
Yep.
we talked about the struggles of
Yes.
Auburn and all of the issues on offense. But here comes Georgia. But I will tell you right now, Kyle, this Georgia defense is horrid against the pass.
That's fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that they recorded their first sack by a defensive lineman last week against Kentucky. This is the perfect recipe for Auburn's offense to finally get rolling against a really, really bad Georgia defense. Your thoughts?
This, by Georgia standards, this is by far the most gettable team they've had since maybe 2017 or 18. Like it's I think this roster that Auburn has compares with Georgia's very, very well, almost all the way across the board. They're going to be, you talked about that defense. They're going to be starting, I think, a freshman offensive lineman. They've got a bunch of guys that are banged up. They've had a ton of bad luck on the offensive line. The table could not be set more perfect for Auburn to win this game. The thing that you just mentioned about the defense is what scares me a little bit, though, because yes, the perceived weakness is that they're vulnerable to the pass and they struggle getting pressure on the quarterback. So my fear is we take that and we try to drop back to pass 40 times, and we see a lot of the same issues that we've seen. Jackson maybe holding the ball a little bit too long. Maybe we give them their second sack or third or fourth sack from a defensive lineman this year. I know that they're much, much better against the run, and they may stack it and dare you to throw the ball. I just think Auburn's got to look at this game with a plan maybe similar to they had in 2023, which was it ain't going to be pretty. It doesn't have to be pretty. The stat sheet doesn't have to look like a Ole Miss game in 2014 or 15. You just got to win the football game. You got to hold the ball. You got to control the game, reduce mistakes, and instead of Javarius Johnson and Shane Hooks in 2023 that you can turn to when you want to run a play action and hit a big pass, you got Malcolm Simmons and Eric Singleton and Cam Coleman. But really get Jackson focused in that run game, and then take your shots. Be patient and take your shots, not continue to try to force it. I think that's going to be the key to this game.
All right. Auburn has not beaten Georgia.
Don't remind me.
Since 2017. They're 8 in a row for Georgia. Kyle, how do you see it playing out? Saturday, they're in Auburn. Does Auburn finally get on the right side of this rivalry and break that 8-game win streak?
I think it's going to be a race to 21. So whoever gets to 21 first probably wins. And this is a big disclaimer, okay? If you see Auburn play a more patient style of offense and they actually work on getting that run game going, not just north-south, but east-west as well, working in Eric Singleton, working in Malcolm Simmons, and really focusing on can we get to more manageable downs and calling it as, okay, it's 1st and 10. Let's get 3 or 4 yards. Okay, now it's 2nd and 6, and eliminate the panicky. I have to get so and so a touch, or I have to get this person a touch. I think if you can have that style of gameplay, Auburn can win this thing. I think they're going to be able to frustrate and not shut down, but contain Gunnar Stockton. And I think they got the best shot from a roster standpoint that they'll maybe ever have against Georgia. And it's a night game under the lights. The crowd's going to be crazy. So race to 21. And if Auburn can play patient on offense instead of panicky, I think they can win this one.
Kyle, I hate to, excuse me. Kyle, I hate to ask this, but if Hugh Freeze falls to 0-3 this season, how long is the chain for him to get fired?
The tough thing here is that there's no real play caller on the staff other than Hugh Freeze. So I would assume, barring just complete and total disaster,
Okay.
He's probably going to be here to. I would imagine you let him coach out the rest of the year. You still have 4 to 5 very winnable games after this one. Now, if you go out there and you get blown out 40-0 or whatever, I think all bets are off. But I don't think people have asked, is he coaching for his job? And I don't think it's necessarily a lose and go home scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think they've put a ton into this game plan over the last 2 weeks. They practiced 2 extra times on the bye week that they typically don't do to get ready for this one. So I think when I say that the effort put into this game plan has definitely been there, and I just wonder personally how much he could handle, how much more he could handle if you put all this effort into this game plan. You throw everything out there, throw everything at them, and then you go out there and it still doesn't work. You almost wonder if you feel like you can't do it anymore. I know that may sound extreme, but at some point in time, like, confidence and just the personal aspect has to weigh in on this whole thing. So it's a big game for a multitude of reasons.
Kyle, look, man, thank you for joining me, and please go and enjoy covering Auburn and Georgia for me, and we would love to catch up with you later on next week, and hopefully for the Auburn Tigers, they can finally get the bad taste of Georgia out of their mouth.
Yep. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it, win, lose, or draw.
Okay. Thank you, man. Catch up with you next week, okay?
All right, sounds great.
So, guys, that is going to wrap up the Auburn side of the Deep South Oldest Rivalry. When we come back, I'm going to be joined by Radi Nabulsi, hopefully I said that correctly, to talk about this game from the Georgia perspective. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show, and we will be right back. Kyle, look, man, thank you. That was awesome.
I'm sorry I got long-winded, but
you're fine, dude. You're fine.
I get it. I've been getting more and more frustrated, and as I do that, I seem to answer questions a lot longer. But
gotcha.
I appreciate you.
Fine. All right, thank you, man.
All right, bye.
And we want to welcome you back inside the Stingray Show. We just finished up with the Auburn side of the Deep South's Oldest Rivalry. And now we are going to focus on this football game from the Georgia perspective, as I'm about to be joined by Radi Nabulsi, who is a Georgia insider, to talk about this game from the Georgia Bulldog perspective. And Georgia has not lost to Auburn since 2017. They are on an 8-game win streak against the Auburn Tigers. Radi, how are things with you over in Georgia?
Things are good. The Georgia fan base is nervous, but for me personally, things are fantastic. I mean, we're in the middle of football season. Couldn't be better. We wait 9 months a year for this. And even though there's sort of an ennui that has entered the Georgia fan base after seeing how their defense has performed, and they have a lot of questions. This is what we live for. We live for the rivalries. We live for this game that's been played 130 times. So it's everything's good here.
You just mentioned it. There is an issue with the defense. What do you think is attributing to that this season over in Athens?
Well, they can't get any pressure on the quarterback, and then they can't cover. So it's a chicken or the egg thing. Does the quarterback have too much time that he gets to pick apart the secondary, or is the secondary can't cover? And, it's just it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Georgia's one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to pressuring the quarterback, actually getting to him. And then they're also not very good at covering. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, that's not like Kirby Smart team. That's not traditional for him. And no, it's not. This is maybe his least talented defense that he's had since maybe 2016, his first year here. So it's it's an absolute concern. They're good against the run. They worked all spring and summer. We asked Kirby Smart on the first day of fall camp, what did you work on this summer? He says, we've got to be able to run the ball and stop the run. And that they have. But no one expected the secondary to get torched so badly. And it's the last two games. I mean, you look at what Joey Aguilar did. Well, let's say last three games. Joey Aguilar at Tennessee torched him in the first half. He went 14-14. Alabama in the first half against Georgia completed 7 of 8 third down conversions. Kentucky, who is just a god-awful football team right now, was able to move the ball through the air, big passes down the field. So if they can't get any pressure on Jackson Arnold, he's just going to absolutely pick them apart.
All right, let's go back to that Alabama game. It is apparent that is an Achilles heel of Kirby Smart and Georgia. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, you drop a touchdown pass. I mean, a wide open touchdown pass, and you lose by 3. You turned the ball over. You fumbled it on your 11-yard line, and the Georgia defense held Alabama to a field goal. Alabama won by a field goal. So you gave them 3 points from your 11-yard line, and you drop a touchdown pass, and then you miss on a 4th and 1, and wide open 4th and 1 play, which should at least give you the field goal to tie it. Or you could have kicked the field goal there. That's the bone of contention as well. But it's just, go back to the Georgia-Alabama game in the SEC championship a few years ago. 1 turnover worth 3 points. Georgia loses by 3 points. It's you have 2 very equal teams, and Alabama's made more plays than you did, and that's exactly what's happened there. And, I mean, a lot of people were down on Alabama after they lost that first game, but people don't realize that Kalen DeBoer is 7-0 when looking at Ryan Day, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, and Kirby Smart. I mean, he's a good coach. He's got a great quarterback, a good offense and defense, and there's a lot of teams going to lose to Alabama. And the fact that Kirby Smart is 1-7 against them, that is an absolutely Achilles heel. But he's been favored in 3 or 4 of those games, and they've just come up 1 or 2 plays short.
All right, we've talked about the defensive issues. Now let's talk about the offense and Gunnar Stockton. What have you seen so far this season out of Gunnar Stockton that you're impressed with, and some things you would like to see him work on?
Well, go back to that first drive against Kentucky last week. I think he carried the ball 3 times, and he can run it. He took a couple big hits, and I think that only just ticked him off, and he ran even harder. That last year with Carson Beck, Carson would run it occasionally, but there's so many times the defense has never thought he was a threat. So no one ever had to stay home, on a play action or anything like that. They never thought he might keep it. There was never any read options in the game that you were worried about. So I like the fact that he gives you that same threat that Jackson Arnold does. Running quarterbacks in college football are game changers. Look at Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss. Look at, any of the guys who are successful at some point, especially on a 3rd down or in the red zone. You got to be ready for that quarterback, the possibility that he's going to keep it. And, he's done that. He's been very accurate. He has a very high quarterback rating. He's turned the ball over once through 5 games. That's pretty good. The flip side of that, what you want to see better is he is so concerned about not turning the ball over, because Kirby Smart's a very conservative coach. He is not he's not going to do anything wild or creative. He's going to win on percentages. He knows that if I can run the ball, then the chances of anything bad happening on a run are minuscule.
Yeah. Hand
the ball off. As long as the guy doesn't drop it, we pick up 5 yards. He'll do that 60 times a game if he's getting 5 yards a carry until, the defense, you're going to have to stop him. Throwing the ball, 3 things can happen. 2 of them are bad, so let's not do that. So Kirby's big on playing the percentages and winning football games, and it's 1 and 2 national titles and a bunch of SEC titles. So it's a formula that works. He learned it at Nick Saban's right hand, and that's he's going to demand that of his quarterbacks, and he's done that with Gunnar Stockton. He's like, do not turn my football over.
Yes.
Our defense isn't great, and if we give the other team extra drives, we will lose football games. To that point, when going through his progressions or things aren't open right off the bat, Gunnar Stockton, some people say he doesn't keep his eyes open downfield and he just tucks and runs, which again, he's a great runner and nothing bad can happen if he's running and then slides. So, but there are a few times where it's like, if he'd have looked up, he'd have seen he had a wide open, 7 route or a wide open 9 or something like that. There's a crossing route where a guy was open, and if he'd have just held it or just seen him, and again, maybe he just assumes that the other team's going to do what they're supposed to do and that route is covered, and therefore he's not going to throw it. But I kind of like to see him let it rip a little bit more. He did, and the one time we said that last week, hey, go ahead and let it rip, Gunnar. He got picked off. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're going to play quarterback for Kirby Smart.
Now, you talked about that this is a heated rivalry that dates back a very long time, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Talk about a couple of the games that stand out to you from the Georgia perspective.
Well, there's, I do a watch-along show with Jim Dunn, the former Georgia Bulldogs head coach, and we actually will be on YouTube this Saturday and Facebook, and we'll have maybe anywhere from 10 to 100,000 people watch the show with us. We're on a second screen, so they can watch the game on their main screen, then watch us on their laptop or iPad or phone. And he was there for the 4 overtime game, down in the Plains. That was wild. And then I think back to one of the crazier ones was when Georgia went down there in Kirby Smart's, I think it was 2017, his second year, and Georgia's got their doors blown off in that first game. I mean, absolutely destroyed. And then they met up with Auburn in the SEC championship game, and it was the reverse. So it's I've seen crazy games down there. I was there for the Prayer and Jordan Hare, the tip ball, Trey Matthews, and all that stuff. I've seen it. I've seen Georgia ebullient, just on absolute cloud high. And I was there when Michael Johnson caught the one in Mark Richt's first year, sealed the SEC championship for them. They hadn't won an SEC championship in forever. And Michael Johnson catches it right in front of me. I'm on the sideline as a photographer. And I've also seen their hearts ripped out, going down there and just losing to Auburn. And no team has cost Georgia more championships, be they SEC or national championships, than Auburn. And I think it's probably true vice versa. When Auburn's on a roll, Georgia seems to have their number. When they were winning all those games, Georgia was the first team to break their streak. It's just, people say it's a rivalry. It absolutely is rivalry, but I think it's almost like a family rivalry. Yeah. You can hate your neighbor and your neighbor hate you, but if it's somebody in the family that you're not getting along with, it's even worse because you know the weak spots and you know the history. And so it's almost like somebody within the family that you're not getting along with. And it makes for very awkward Thanksgiving and Christmases when you have these two teams playing.
We are up against another break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into this year's matchup of Georgia and Auburn that is back on the Plains at Auburn on Saturday. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show, and we will be right back. Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. We are previewing the Deep South's oldest rivalry with the Georgia Bulldogs and Radi Nabulsi. Hopefully I said that correctly. And Radi, when you look at this matchup with the Alabama game there for Georgia a couple of weeks ago, it didn't go the way of Georgia. Talk about the way that the Georgia fan base is feeling about going to Auburn, and especially with Auburn being in a desperate situation, being 0-2 in conference to start this season.
Well, you need look no further than Florida last week. They were in a desperate situation. They get Texas at home. crazy game at night, and they actually wind up winning it. Georgia fans can point to the streak. Hey, you've won 8 in a row, but that doesn't get you an automatic first down. It doesn't get you 3 points on the board. It doesn't convert you a third down. It does nothing for you other than bragging rights. It has zero impact on this year's game. And you're going up against a quarterback who, I mean, I'll write a column later this afternoon. It's I'll do 3 observations, 2 questions, and 1 prediction. And one of the observations I'll have is how Georgia makes every quarterback they face, at least in the first half, look Heisman worthy. I mentioned Aguilar going 14-14 and the Alabama success. So Jackson Arnold's got his back against the wall. He has 2 great receivers that Georgia's going to have a very hard time covering, and Cam and Singleton. Singleton has, in the last 2 times he's faced Georgia when he was at Georgia Tech, has just absolutely trounced Georgia's secondary. And it's not like he's gotten worse. He's only gotten better. So they couldn't cover him before. I don't know that they'll be able to cover him now. The only shot that Georgia has is this is a Auburn team that has not been able to protect its quarterback. Yep. But Georgia's almost last in the league in sacks. They have no edge rushers. They have nobody who can get to the quarterback. They had their first sack by a defensive lineman last week against Kentucky. And it was a second string guy. It wasn't one of their starters. So they need time. And again, those 2 losses that Auburn has were both on the road against top 10 teams. This is a good football team. Georgia fans know it. Georgia fans are worried because Georgia fans know they don't have a pass rush and they can't cover. So they think, well, if we're in a shootout, do they have a lot of confidence in the offense? No. I mean, Mike Bobo is still one of the most hated guys in all of Athens. He's offensive coordinator. People blame him for stuff going all the way back to Mark Richt, but he's actually a very good coordinator and is putting points on the board. But they could only score 21 against Kentucky because they dropped a pass and didn't convert an easy 4th down. And, Georgia should have scored 35, but they only scored 21. What you should have done doesn't matter. Auburn should have beaten Oklahoma, and you had the whole thing with the refs there. So my point is Georgia fans realize this is a good Auburn football team and that they are desperate. They need to win. Georgia needs to win too, but it's going to be on the road. It's going to be in a raucous stadium as they retire Cam Newton's jersey. A night game in Jordan-Hare is never where you want to go to win a game that you have to win. So the fan base is nervous, and they should be.
I do want to ask you about the fan base. Do you feel like that it is justified the way that they treat Mike Bobo? Because personally, I do not.
No, I mean, I'm often called a Bobo defender, and I covered him when he was I've been doing this a long time. I covered him when he was a student, a quarterback at Georgia, and I covered him as he came up through the ranks. My son grew up playing football against his son. I've known him for a long time, but we're not friends. I mean, we're friendly, but I don't know him. I don't think I have his phone number. But I get annoyed when people bring up stuff from like the Richt era. I'm like, okay, when he was here, Georgia did not win a championship under Mark Richt. They did everything but. And a lot of people say, well, that was Mike Bobo's fault. I'm like, he was scoring 41 points a game. Georgia did not have a defense. Mark Richt is an offensive-minded coach. Georgia put points on the board. They couldn't stop anybody when they had their best chances. So, they put a lot of NFL guys in the NFL from the defense and offense, but they were never at the same time. Kirby Smart gets here, and he wins 2 championships. And the problem was he won it with Todd Monken.
Yes.
And a lot of people say, well, he's not Todd Monken. And I'm like, well, Todd Monken's struggling in the NFL right now. It's not like he's the greatest. And again, I just hate it when you compare him to Todd Monken, who had Brock Bowers, Stetson Bennett, Ladd McConkey, Darnell Washington, Amarius Mims, Broderick Jones. I mean, first rounders all across the offense. And then you had the same thing on defense. You had that 2021 defense. They were all drafted. The 2022 defense, practically the same thing. You had 2 generational defenses that got you the ball back consistently and got you great field position. Georgia went games without a turnover. They're almost last in the league in turnovers. I'm pretty sure they're -1 on the year. Alabama's +7. So when you're not getting turnovers, you're not helping out your defense at all. You're not playing complementary football. that's not your offensive coordinator's fault.
Right.
And again, I'm not trying to defend Mike Bobo. The best thing that could happen in my company, UGAsports.com, would be for Mike Bobo to get fired. Because then I'll have a coaching search, and we'll have updates, and we'll have rumors, and we'll have how these interviews went. I mean, the coaching search for someone in the media is the best thing that can ever happen. It's going to get you a lot more readers, a lot more follows. So I have no reason to defend Mike Bobo. But my issue is, let's be fair. And if he's not getting the job done, he hung 44 on Kentucky on the road. Put 45 up on, put 35 up on Kentucky, and he could have. His starters didn't even play the fourth quarter. So the guys doesn't have the same talent that Todd Monken had. So you can't compare apples to oranges.
Yes. All right. And if Georgia is going to go into Jordan-Hare and continue that win streak on Saturday, give us a couple of X factors on offense and, of course, on defense, please.
On offense, they have to be able to run the ball, which is saying a lot because the Auburn defense is fantastic against the run. It's, I think, sixth in the SEC in amount of rushing yards allowed. If Georgia can run on them, then that means Georgia keeps the ball. Jackson Arnold isn't on the field a whole lot, and Georgia has to be able to hit a few explosives. You can't just run it. So that means they got to get the ball out to Zachariah Branch, who's so fast in the screen game. Big Colby Young, the wide receiver. Get those guys involved. Maybe hit a play to Dylan Bell. The guy had 3 touchdowns last week, 1 rushing, 2 receiving. He's Dylan Bell's special. And they use it in a lot of different ways. So if they need a few explosive plays to keep the chains moving, to change the field position. Then on defense, got to be able to stop the run, which Georgia's been good at that. But somebody either has to figure out how to cover Cam or figure out how to cover Singleton, or somebody has to be able to get to the quarterback. If this is the game where they can get to the quarterback and actually get some pressure on him, then they can win this ball game. But if they let Jackson Arnold sit in the pocket and pick them apart, then they'll lose.
All right. How do you see it playing out Saturday down at Jordan-Hare with the Auburn Tigers with their backs against the wall, trying to avoid 0-3 start in the conference? Do you have Georgia or do you have Auburn?
Well, half of our staff a lot of our staff picked Auburn to win. A lot of them picked Georgia to win. On Monday, with WXIA Channel 11 in Atlanta, I picked Georgia. By Wednesday, I was picking Auburn. Last night, we had to put our predictions in for this morning, and I picked Georgia to win by, I think, 1 point, 2 points. I figured they would be able to score 3 touchdowns and a field goal, or 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals, because at some point you just can't keep moving on that defense. So I'm thinking maybe 27 points, 24 points, and I expect Auburn to at least hit 2 big touchdowns, and maybe Georgia can bow up and stop them in the red zone. Maybe they kick 2-3 field goals, which basically you wind up 24-23, Georgia with a 1-point victory. But again, Vegas knows how close these teams are. Georgia's a 3.5-point favorite. That is not saying a lot. So a lot of people go 0-2 against Georgia. They're definitely going to be 0-3. Vegas knows. Vegas had the line last week, 20.5. Georgia won by 21. And it's been that way all year. They've got Georgia's number, and the Sharks out in Vegas know that this is going to be a tight game. One turnover, one way or the other, is going to determine the outcome of this contest.
Look, man, Radi, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Go and enjoy covering the Deep South Oldest Rivalry between the Bulldogs and the Auburn Tigers, and we would love to catch up with you later on this season to continue our discussions of the Georgia Bulldogs.
Hit me up and we'll do it again.
All right. Thank you, man. All right. So that is going to wrap up the Auburn and Georgia preview show there. I really do want to thank both guests for joining me this evening.